Said it at the dinner table, not in private, not in a whispered argument upstairs where the walls could at least pretend not to hear. He said it in front of everyone, with the gravy still warm and the candles still burning, and he didn't even lower his voice. You've never contributed a single thing to this family, not one thing? And frankly, we're done pretending otherwise. I remember staring at the centerpiece my mother had spent 2 days arranging. Sunflowers and dried wheat stalks, very autumn, very Pinterest. I remember thinking how strange it was that I was noticing flowers at a moment like this. My name is Sloane. I was 32 years old that November, and the man who told me I had never contributed anything to this family had no idea that 3 days earlier, I had wired more money than he would earn in a decade into an account he would never know existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Growing up, I was the placeholder child. My brother Emmett was the one everyone talked about. Emmett with the easy smile and the baseball scholarship that fell through junior year but somehow still got retold as a triumph at every family gathering. Emmett, who could do no wrong, who borrowed money and called it a loan while everyone nodded, who had been about to close a deal for the better part of 8 years. I was the one who got B+s when Emmett got A-. And somehow Emmett's grades were still discussed at dinner. I was the one who left Ohio at 22 for Seattle with 2 suitcases and a laptop, and nobody threw me a going-away party because, as my mother put it, "You'll be back in 6 months, Sloane." I was not back in 6 months. I want to be fair here. My parents weren't cruel people in the way that word usually gets used. They didn't scream. They didn't throw things. What they did was quieter and, I think, harder to name for a long time. They simply arranged their attention around Emmett the way you arrange furniture around a fireplace, and I was a side table that nobody quite knew what to do with. My father, Harold, was a retired civil engineer. Methodical. Proud. The kind of man who believed that success looked a certain way. A steady salary, a house in a good neighborhood, a firm handshake at the right moments. He had built a decent life by those measures, and he wanted his son to build the same one. His daughter, I think, was expected to marry into one. My mother, Carol, was softer but not in the ways that helped. She smoothed things over. She changed the subject. She sent me birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside until I was 28, which would have been sweet if it hadn't felt like she genuinely didn't know what else to offer me. And then there was Emmett. Emmett at 35 was exactly the same as Emmett at 22, which was exactly the problem. He had moved back home at 30 after his third business venture, a craft brewery, a food truck, something involving cryptocurrency that I never fully understood, had not panned out. He was living in his childhood bedroom. He was charming about it. He always was. I had visited 3 times in the past 4 years. Always holidays. Always careful, always aware that I was walking into a house where the temperature had been set to Emmett's comfort long before I arrived. The business I had built was not flashy. That was intentional. I had spent my first 2 years in Seattle working for a logistics software company, learning everything I could, living in a studio apartment where the radiator made a sound like someone trying to start a very old car. In year 3, I started consulting on the side. In year 4, I quit my job. In year 5, I brought in my first partner, a woman named Odette, who was smarter than anyone I'd ever met, and had the patience of someone who had already survived considerable chaos. By the time I was 30, Odette and I had built a supply chain optimization platform that was being used by mid-sized manufacturers across the Pacific Northwest. By 31, we had expanded to clients in 11 states. By 32, the year of the dinner table, our annual revenue had crossed $14 million, and we had recently closed a funding round that valued the company at considerably more than that. I had not told my parents any of this. It wasn't a strategy, not at first. It was more that I had tried in smaller ways over the years, and the responses had been so deflating that I eventually stopped. "That sounds complicated," my mother would say. "Is that like a real job?" my father asked once. And I could tell he wasn't trying to be unkind. He genuinely didn't have a framework for it. After a while, I stopped offering information that I knew would only come back diminished. I had an apartment in Capitol Hill. I had a good accountant and a better attorney. I had a life that I was proud of, that I'd built myself largely in silence. I flew home for Thanksgiving because my mother called in October and her voice had a particular quality I recognized. Thin, effortful, trying not to ask for something while very obviously asking for something. She missed me. She said it like an apology. I bought the ticket. The drive from Columbus Airport to my parents' house in Guyana takes about 25 minutes. I had done it enough times that I could map it with my eyes closed. Strip malls giving way to subdivisions, giving way to the particular residential quiet of a neighborhood that hadn't changed much since 1987. My brother's car was in the driveway when I pulled in. His car and, I noticed, a newer truck I didn't recognize. I would find out later it was purchased 8 months ago with a down payment that came from a source I was not yet aware of. Inside, the house smelled like it always did. Candles from the Bath & Body Works fall collection, and something baking. My mother hugged me at the door with the particular warmth of someone who had been rehearsing the hug. My father shook my hand. Emmett was on the couch watching pre-game coverage and lifted 2 fingers in greeting without turning his head. Some homecomings are like that. There were 6 of us at the table. My parents, me, Emmett, my Aunt Phyllis, who drove up from Lancaster every Thanksgiving without fail, and Emmett's girlfriend Tara, who I was meeting for the first time. Tara was pleasant. She worked in dental billing and seemed genuinely confused about why the energy in the room felt the way it did. I liked her immediately and felt sorry for her at the same time. Dinner was fine until it wasn't. The conversation moved the way it always moved at that table, through Emmett's orbit. His new idea, something involving a fitness app that his friend was developing and needed a strategic partner, which I understood to mean that someone was about to ask someone for money. My father listened with the particular quality of attention he reserved for Emmett's schemes, which was not skeptical but eager. Like a man watching a magician who keeps dropping the coin but still believes the trick is coming. I talked to Phyllis about her garden. I talked to Tara about the drive from Columbus. I was fine. I was managing. And then my father looked at me the way he sometimes did, not unkind but assessing. The way you assess something that doesn't quite fit where you've put it. And he said, "Sloane, you've been in Seattle, what, 10 years now?" "9, I said. "And you're still doing the consulting thing." It wasn't a question. I answered it anyway. "Yes. Still consulting." He nodded slowly. My mother was very focused on her plate. "Emmett's been looking at a real opportunity," my father said. "Something solid. It would be good to see both of you settled somewhere. Stable." "I am stable," I said. "You know what I mean." I did know what he meant. That was the thing. I'd always known exactly what he meant, and I had spent 9 years in Seattle not letting it mean anything. And sitting at that table in November with the candles and the sunflowers and the very correct side dishes, something in me that had been patient for a very long time just quietly stopped being patient. "I genuinely don't," I said. "Could you say it plainly?" My father set down his fork. He looked at me in a way that was almost confused, like I had changed the rules of a game we were supposed to keep playing. "You've never contributed a single thing to this family," he said. "Not one thing. And frankly, we're done pretending otherwise." The table went silent. My Aunt Phyllis made a small sound. Tara looked at her plate with the determined focus of a person who wishes she were somewhere else. My mother said, "Harold, I mean it," he said. "Emmett has been here, he's been present, he's put effort into this family. You show up twice a year and we're supposed to be grateful?" I sat with it for a moment. The sound of the refrigerator. The football game still audible from the living room. "Okay," I said. "That's it, okay? I heard you." I helped clear the plates after dinner. I washed the serving dishes because that was what I always did. I said goodnight to Phyllis and gave her a hug that she held for slightly longer than usual. And I could feel in the pressure of her hands that she wanted to say something she didn't know how to say. I nodded at Emmett. I told Tara it was nice to meet her. I told my mother the food was good. I drove to the Marriott off Easton Town Center and I sat in the parking lot for about 15 minutes and I called Odette. "How bad?" she said when she picked up. "Pretty standard," I said. "Maybe a little worse." "Are you okay?" "I think so," I said. "I'll talk to you tomorrow." I went inside and ordered room service and watched 3 episodes of a cooking competition I'd been meaning to get to for months, and I slept better than I expected to. 3 weeks later is when the phone calls started. The first one came on a Monday morning. I was at my desk in the office when I saw my mother's number. I let it go to voicemail. She called again an hour later. And then my father called, which almost never happened. He was not a phone caller, hadn't been since I could remember. I listened to the voicemail that evening. His voice sounded different. Smaller. Sloane. It's Dad. I need you to call me when you get a chance. There's something we need to talk to you about, it's important. I called back the next morning. It took my mother about 8 minutes of circling before she got to it. My father kept interjecting with clarifications that only made it more complicated, so I finally said, "Just tell me the whole thing from the beginning." Here is the whole thing. 8 months prior, Emmett had started talking to my parents about a business opportunity. A partner of his needed an investor for the fitness app, and the opportunity was time-sensitive, and the minimum investment was $60,000. My parents did not have $60,000 liquid. What they did have was equity in their house, purchased in 1991, largely paid off. Valued now at somewhere around $380,000. They did not take out a home equity loan. What they did was worse and more careless, and I still have trouble fully understanding how they let it get this far. Emmett had found a private investor, a friend of a friend, a man who ran what he described as a private lending operation, who had offered to provide the $60,000 against a second mortgage on my parents' house. The terms were not the terms of a bank. They were the terms of someone who understood that the people he was lending to were not going to look at them very carefully. My parents had signed. My mother told me, with a specific kind of shame in her voice, that they had also listed me as a co-borrower, using a version of my signature that I had not provided. I let the silence sit for a moment. "You forged my signature," I said. "Emmett said it was just a formality," my mother said. "That you wouldn't even, Mom. You forged my signature on a loan document." She started crying. My father made a sound that I can only describe as the sound of a man who has just understood the full dimension of something he thought was a small thing. The fitness app, predictably, had not launched. The partner had stopped returning Emmett's calls. The $60,000 was gone. The lender was now asking for payment on a schedule that my parents couldn't meet, and because my name was on the document, regardless of how it had gotten there, I was going to be on the receiving end of collections activity very soon if nothing was resolved. I said I needed some time. I hung up and I sat at my desk and I looked at the ceiling of my office for a while. Then I called my attorney. My attorney, Priya, was someone I had worked with since year 2 of the business. She was precise and thorough and not easily surprised, but when I explained the situation to her, she went quiet for a moment in a way that told me she was recalibrating. "Okay," she said. "A few things. First, the forgery is serious. That's potentially criminal exposure for your parents and your brother. Second, the lender sounds predatory, which may actually work in our favor. Third, do not contact the lender directly. Not yet." Priya spent the next few days pulling the loan document, reviewing the lender's filing history, and making some calls I was not privy to. What she came back with was not entirely surprising, but was still a lot to hold. The private lending operation was not exactly operating within normal bounds. There were 2 prior complaints filed against the same individual with the Ohio Division of Financial Institutions. The terms of the loan included provisions that would not have been permissible under standard mortgage lending regulation. The forged signature, Priya told me, was the clearest piece of leverage we had. It created liability, but it also gave me standing to dispute the instrument entirely. "If you want to," she said carefully, "you could let this play out in a way that is very bad for your parents." "I know," I said. "That's not a recommendation. I'm telling you what the options are." "I know," I said again. I asked her what it would cost to resolve it cleanly. She gave me a number. I told her to move forward. The resolution took 11 days and involved Priya corresponding with the lender's attorney in a way that I was told was pointed. The lender settled for a discounted payoff, significantly less than the original $60,000. Given the questionable circumstances of the loan's origination, my name was removed from the document entirely. The matter was closed. I paid for all of it. I did not tell my parents what it had cost. I did not tell them about the lender's legal exposure or the details of how it had been resolved. I called my mother one evening when I knew the payoff had cleared and I said simply, "It's taken care of." She cried again. My father got on the line and his voice had the quality of someone trying to locate words that don't exist for what he wanted to say. He kept starting sentences and stopping them. "Sloane, I know what you must think of us, Dad. It's handled. We'll pay you back. Every dollar, we will. We don't have to talk about that right now." After I hung up, I sat with it for a long time. I want to be honest about what I felt, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes this story worth telling. I was not magnanimous. I was not floating above it all in some place of peaceful clarity. I was tired. I was angry in a way that had nowhere to go. I thought about my father's voice at the dinner table, the certainty in it, the ease with which he had said those words in front of everyone, and I felt something that I can only describe as the specific exhaustion of being misread by people who should know you. The money was not the point. The money I could handle. What I could not as easily handle was the understanding that had settled in over those 3 weeks that my family had felt comfortable enough to use my name, my financial identity, my signature, without asking me, without telling me. Because at some level they had calculated that I wouldn't notice or couldn't fight back. That I was, even in their most desperate moment, a resource to be used rather than a person to be called. I had flown home for Thanksgiving because my mother's voice was thin and effortful. I had washed the serving dishes. I had driven to the Marriott and ordered room service and not said any of the things I could have said. And in exchange for all of that careful, practiced smallness, my name had been forged on a predatory loan. I booked a flight back to Seattle the next morning. I did not call to say I was leaving. I sent my mother a text that said I needed some space and that I would be in touch when I was ready. I was not ready for a while. January came. Then February. I got a card in the mail from my Aunt Phyllis. Just a regular card. Winter scene. Birds on a branch. And inside she had written only, "I've always known who you are. I hope you know it too." I put it on my desk and it stayed there. Odette and I closed a partnership in February that we'd been working toward for a year. I went to Austin for a conference and met people who had been following our work and wanted to talk about where it was going. I ran along Lake Union in the mornings when the weather let me and I thought about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. My mother called in March. I picked up. We talked for almost an hour. She talked about her garden, which was just beginning to wake up, and about a neighbor's dog that had started visiting the yard, and then she said, with the particular quality of someone choosing their words from a great distance, "I want you to know that what happened, I know what it was. I know what we did. I'm not going to ask you to be okay with it." I didn't say anything. "I just want you to know that I know," she said. It wasn't everything. It wasn't even close to everything. But it was something she had decided to say without anyone asking her to, and it cost her something, and I could hear that. "Okay," I said. "I hear you." My father called a week later and the conversation was shorter and harder and less resolved, but he called. He did not apologize exactly. He said he had been thinking. He said some things he did not say fully, and I let them stay unfinished because I think finishing them would have been harder for both of us. Emmett texted once. It said, "Hey, wanted to say sorry. I know that prob doesn't cut it." I read it several times. I didn't respond for 2 weeks and then I wrote back, "Thanks for saying it." And then I put the phone down. I am not going to tell you we fixed it. I'm not going to give you the version where everyone comes around and the dinner table becomes a different kind of place and we all find our way to something clean and whole. I don't think that's the story here. And I think pretending it is would be a disservice to anyone who has sat at a table like that and tried to figure out what to do afterward. What I can tell you is this. I went back to Seattle. I ran the company I had built. I had dinners with Odette and with friends I had made over 9 years of building a life that nobody handed me. I had an apartment with good light and a view of the water on clear days, which were not every day, but were enough. I talked to my mother more, not about everything, about enough. I thought about my father's face when he said those words at the table. The certainty? And I understood that it came from somewhere, that it wasn't malice exactly but a kind of blindness, and understanding that didn't fix it, but it helped me carry it differently. There is a version of this story where I confront them with the numbers, where I show them the revenue reports and the wire transfers and I watch their faces rearrange themselves. I have imagined that version many times. In it, I say something pointed and perfect, and their understanding arrives like something cinematic, and I feel vindicated and whole. But that's not the version I chose. The version I chose was quieter and took longer and still isn't finished. It is the version where I decide that who I am is not contingent on whether they can see it, where the proof of what I have built does not live in my father's revised opinion of me, but in the work itself, in the people I trust, in the ordinary Tuesday mornings where I sit at my desk in a company I started from nothing and I know without needing it confirmed that I've never once been what he said I was. He didn't know. That was the thing he never understood. Not about the money, not about the company. He didn't know me. And I spent a long time grieving that, and then I stopped waiting for him to catch up. I am still going. I am still building. And on the days when the doubt comes back, and it does come back, that's the honest part. I think about my Aunt Phyllis's card on my desk. Birds on a branch in winter. The handwriting that took its time. I've always known who you are. That was enough to keep going. It still is. I've thought a lot about what my father actually said that night. Not the words. I have those memorized. But the ease of it. That's the part that stayed with me longest. He didn't hesitate. He didn't lower his voice. He said it the way you state something obvious, something everyone in the room already knows and has simply been too polite to say out loud. That kind of certainty doesn't come from nowhere. It gets built, slowly, over years of not looking. And I think that's the part nobody talks about. How the people who underestimate you are usually not doing it out of cruelty. They're doing it because they stopped paying attention a long time ago and never noticed the cost of that. My father stopped paying attention to me around the time it became clear I wasn't going to be the version of success he recognized. And because he couldn't see what I was building, he decided I wasn't building anything. That's not malice. It's a failure of imagination and maybe something harder to forgive than malice because it's so much more ordinary. What I learned, not from a book, not from anyone who told me, but from living through it, is that how we choose to respond to being underestimated is one of the only things that actually belongs to us. I could have spent those 9 years in Seattle trying to prove something. I could have called home with updates, sent articles, angled for recognition. Some people do that. I understand why. But I think it costs something. That constant reaching toward people who aren't reaching back. It costs a kind of energy you can't really afford when you're trying to build something real. What Odette and I built didn't get built because I was angry. It got built because I got up in the morning and did the work and then got up the next morning and did more of it. That's not a dramatic answer. I know that. But I think a lot of the most important things in a life are not dramatic. They're just repeated and quiet and they accumulate into something you can stand on. The forgery was the moment I understood what my absence had meant to them. Not as a loss, but as a convenience. I was someone whose name could be used because they didn't expect me to notice, or fight back, or have resources of my own. That understanding was painful in a way that the dinner table comment wasn't, because it was specific. It told me something precise about how they had been thinking about me, or not thinking about me, for a long time. And I paid the debt anyway. I want to be honest that I'm still not entirely sure what that decision says about me. Maybe it was integrity. Maybe it was the path of least resistance, dressed up as something nobler. What I know is that I couldn't let my parents lose their house over something my brother had done, and they had been foolish enough to let happen. I couldn't do that and still be the person I've spent 32 years trying to be. Emmett texted, "Sorry." My father called and stumbled through something that wasn't quite an apology but was in the neighborhood of one. My mother said she knew what she'd done. None of it was everything. All of it was something. I think about Phyllis's card sometimes. Birds on a branch, winter. Just her handwriting and one sentence. She had been watching all along and had never said so, and she chose that moment to say it. That kind of witnessing, quiet, unsolicited, long held, is rarer than most people think. I don't take it lightly. What I carry forward from all of it is this. Your integrity is not for the people who doubted you. It's not a performance in their direction. It's the thing you build in private, the choices you make when no one is measuring them, the way you treat people when you have every reason not to. That's what you actually are. And on the days when that feels like it isn't enough, I think about the work and the company and Odette across the desk from me and a winter card I keep where I can see it. It was always enough. I just had to stop waiting for someone else to confirm it.